Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today we have a big show for you. We're going to talk about some MLB debuts from the number one overall prospect in all of baseball. That's right, Jackson Holliday is finally coming up to the majors. He is going to make his debut tonight. What that means for the Orioles the rest of the year and their future now that their team continues to get more and more stacked. We're also going to talk about the massive injury to one of the big stars of the NBA in segment 2, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the big contract handed out in the NFL, and we're going to finish it off. Why not hit all four sports today, right? Talk about potential movement of the Arizona Coyotes in our fourth and final segment. So stick around for all of that. Like I said, we're going to start off with Jackson Holliday. The number one prospect in all of baseball is making his debut tonight for the Orioles. We'll talk about all of that in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. You can control what we talk about on the show. When you leave that tip or donation, a message will pop up on the bottom of the screen. You type whatever you want in that message. All you need to do is leave it. We'll talk about whatever you would like to cover. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we're going to start off our show today with Jackson Holliday. Jackson Holliday, the number one prospect in all of Major League Baseball, is making his debut. His father was a major leaguer, Roy Halladay, one of the better pitchers of our era. And now we have Jackson Holliday, who is... Lineups aren't out officially, but they expect him to play second base, bat in the 9-hole. That game is going to... First pitch is at 7:10 against the Boston Red Sox. Cutter Crawford, this kid is special. If you haven't checked him out in the minor leagues, the Orioles are building something special down there. Just a couple days ago, maybe about a week ago at this point, the Orioles put up 28 runs in their minor leagues. This is with their stacked minor league roster, one of the best rosters in all of baseball. Major league roster that won 105 games last season, best record in the American League, and now they're adding to it. This team has built and built and built, and now they're finally ready to go. Baltimore has struggled baseball-wise for quite some time, and it's good to see Camden Yards full again. This is one of the more hyped prospects to come up in quite some time. We talk about a guy like Jackson Holliday, who is coming up here. You know, the last prospect that I can remember this much hype being around was Julio Rodriguez out there with the Mariners. So you take a look at what he's done. Jackson Holliday is supposed to be... He's the number one prospect in all of baseball. He is a special talent. He is going to be incredible. He's ready. If you've watched his tape, he is ready to go. He is killing pitching down in AAA, AA, every single level he's been. He was the first overall pick in 2022. So it's taken him just over a year to get into the majors. And for a lot of people, it doesn't usually happen that quick. He is a very special talent. We're starting to see more and more young talent get into the league quicker, especially these top-tier, super high draft picks. But the Orioles have done a really good job with that organization. They are going to be contenders for years to come. If you weren't here yesterday, we did a little power rankings. I had the Orioles at number 4. Adding Jackson Holliday to a lineup that already has Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Cedric Mullins. These guys are stacked. You have Jackson Holliday batting in the 9-hole. You know, your wraparound guy, that's great, but he's going to kill opposing pitchers. I'm very, very excited to see him. Again, first pitch of his career tips off at 7:10 against the Boston Red Sox. The Orioles, you know, they started off the season very hot. They've been in a bit of a slump. They split the series with the Pirates and lost 1 of 3 against the Royals. teams that they probably are better than, definitely are better than, I think at least. But the Orioles have a really bright future. The Orioles are going to be incredible. Uh, I'm very excited for this game. Check it out if you can. Like I said, this is one of the most hyped prospects in quite some time in Major League Baseball. We don't get guys like this every year. You know, we've had a lot of really good rookies come up recently. I mentioned Julio Rodriguez out there in Seattle with the Mariners. They are, you know, he's an MVP frontrunner this season, at least Vegas odds wise. Adley Rutschman on the Orioles came up out of the gate. Wyatt Langford for the Rangers this season is coming out really strong. There's a lot of really good young talent in the MLB right now. We're kind of in that changing of the guard area where these older, more established guys are starting to leave. You know, your Bryce Harper, Mike Trout. It's not that they're gone, but they've still got time and they're still good. But they're starting to pass the torch on to the new faces of the league. You know, these young guys. It's really exciting in baseball right now, and it's good. It's really good for a sport that needed a breath of life. Jackson Holliday is someone that can absolutely bring that, along with all these young guys that are coming up. I think at least 7 of the top 10 prospects in baseball are either already up or expected to be up by the end of the season. It's just really exciting. You're getting a new changing of the guard in baseball, and new teams are taking over the top. You know, you're still going to have your Dodgers that just pay everybody more money than any other team could possibly pay. But now you have the Orioles building from the inside out. It's really exciting. I'm so excited for this kid to debut. He's going to be something special. Jackson Holliday, like I said, makes his debut tonight. You take a look at some of the stuff that he has done in the minor leagues. It's incredible. You know, putting up just this season alone, you know, 42 at bats, 14 hits. You know, he's hitting 333. His career, he's hitting 321 in the minors. OPS at 948 for his career, over 1,000 for the season. He is mashing down there, mashing. He's got power. He's got the tools. He's gonna be really good. He's been the player of the week, player of the month, 3 times. Top MLB prospect. Like I said, he's a special talent. He's going to be really good in this league. He makes his debut tonight. Check that out. Very excited for the Orioles, who, like I said, they already have a lot of they already have a stacked roster. They already won 105 games last season, and now they're adding the best prospect in baseball to that roster. The Orioles are going to continue to do things like this for the next couple years because the Orioles aren't done building. They've been a poverty team for quite some time. You know, they had that little run with Adam Jones, and they had that one season of Chris Davis. But other than that, in the last 10 years, there hasn't been much to cheer for in Oriole land in baseball. But Jackson Holliday is here. He is ready to make a statement. I think he'll be great. I'm very excited to watch him make his debut tonight against the Boston Red Sox in Boston. A nice place to make your debut, you know, at Fenway. I feel like that's a dream for a lot of young baseball players. But yeah, in our next segment coming up, we're going to move out of baseball, out of Jackson Holliday, talk a little bit about the NBA. The playoffs, what Giannis' injury means for the East, what it means for the rest of the league in general, if he'll be able to come back for the playoffs, all of that coming up next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the face shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day.
I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replace all this, my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, if you are just tuning in, we have just finished talking about Jackson Holliday making his debut in the MLB, taking on the Boston Red Sox tonight at 7:10. In this segment here, we're going to talk a little bit about Giannis Antetokounmpo and his injury, what that means for the Bucks, if he'll be able to come back for the playoffs, exactly what that injury is. It was super scary looking last night. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message will pop up on the bottom of the screen there for you, me, everybody else around the world to see. We'll have a little discussion about whatever you had to say. You can control what we talk about here on the show. All you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give. But yeah, like I was saying, in this second segment here, we're going to talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo's injury. Giannis, one of the brightest stars of the NBA today, went down on a super scary-looking injury in the third quarter of last night's game against the Boston Celtics, a game which the Bucks kind of needed. They rebounded. They were on a 4-game losing streak. The Bucks have been kind of on a slide lately. Not the kind of poise that you want as you head into the NBA playoffs coming up right around the corner. He goes down. It's a non-contact injury. Everyone is just fearing the worst. They take him in for a scan of his Achilles area. Luckily for the Bucks, for Giannis, for the sport of basketball as a whole, it is not an Achilles injury. What they are calling it is a soleus muscle strain. So, for those who are unaware, it's part of the calf, the soleus muscle. It's one of the two muscles that's made up of the calf. It starts right below your knee. This is from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, by the way. Just below your knee, runs right down your lower leg, and it connects to the Achilles, which is why they went and checked that. So, this is the muscle that crosses the ankle joint. So, it is very lucky for the Bucks, for the sport of basketball, that this was only a soleus injury and not an Achilles injury. Damian Lillard actually suffered this injury in 2022 in November. He came back just about 15 days later. He was injured on November 20th. He came back on December 4th. So that is a good sign. The recovery time depends on how severe of the strain it is, right? And obviously it depends on how good of healing that the player has, but these are athletes. They have the best treatment. They should be on the front end of the timetable. Generally, they say about 2 weeks, which is consistent with what Damian Lillard suffered. Now, how close he is to 100%, that's right when the playoffs start. The injury was suffered last night, so April 9th. The playoffs do not start until April 20th or 21st. So if we're looking at this, it gives him almost exactly 2 weeks to recover from this. You know, he has a history of leg injuries. You know, he's had surgery on his leg before, and he's a big guy. Knee injuries are a big thing for guys of that size and his strength. And he's only 29, but he's been through his fair share of injuries. So he's been playing through a lot of stuff. You know, we have proof, he generally comes back quicker than a lot of people. And whether that means he plays through it or he heals, I'm unaware. He is only 29. His injury history is going back to when he's younger, obviously, before 29, when his biggest injury, I believe, happened when he was like 26. So he it's a lot easier to heal when you're younger. So we take a look at all of this. It's not the greatest situation for the Bucks, and luckily, like I said, he'll most likely be back for the playoffs. The playoffs are 2 weeks from now. That is generally the consensus timeline for an injury such as this one. But you never know exactly how it's going to go. You never know if there's going to be any setbacks, anything else that they find. You take a look at this right now. We're looking at a 2 week injury. He'll be back for the playoffs, maybe not at 100%. And we don't know how that's going to affect a team like the Bucks that are already struggling. Maybe without Giannis on the floor, Dame can step up, do what he did in Portland. Now, he never carried a team to a championship in Portland, but he can go back to being that number one scoring option. Something that they've kind of struggled with all season, dividing up who goes where. But in the playoffs in the East now, assuming that Giannis isn't at 100%, that takes the number one threat for the Celtics off the board. The Celtics are quite possibly the best team in all of basketball right now. They are so good. They're stacked top to bottom. They've one of the best defenses in the league. Their offense continues to score at an incredibly high clip, and they're just really good. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, and look at who they have in the East to contend with. You have the Bucks, who on paper should be able to contend with them, but their season's been kind of a disaster, adding Dame and getting worse, arguably. The Knicks are incredibly injured. If they were healthy, Julius Randle's going to be out for the playoffs. If they had him, if they get OG Anunoby back, maybe they can make a slash at them. Joel Embiid is back for the Sixers. That's one of those things that maybe they're the second best team in the East now because they have Joel Embiid. The East is incredibly weak. I mean, Atlanta is 36-43. They're in that 10 spot. Miami's 44-35 in that 8 spot. If we go back to the old playoff format, they're the last team in. But you go look at the West. The 6 seed Pacers, 46-34. They would be battling for that 6 seed in the playoffs right now. The East is just incredibly weak right now, and it's not the kind of it kind of is reminiscent of the Eagles' run to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs recently. Super easy conference, and then you run into a tough team, and maybe the Celtics will be different. But looking at it on paper right now, the Celtics, if they don't make the finals in the East right now, the way that it is, with an injured Giannis, beat-up Knicks squad, maybe Joel Embiid is your biggest competition, a guy that has consistently struggled against your team. If you don't make the championship game, the championship series, it's a really disappointment of a season. And the West is stacked, don't get me wrong. Like, almost every single playoff spot has been claimed so far in the NBA. We're taking a look at, there's still seeding to be done, but in the East at least, in the East and the West, all the playoff teams are set. We know who's going to be in the playoffs, and we know who generally is going to be in the play-in. Now, for the West especially, that's the more interesting one of them. You have there's only 1 through 5 are locked in. They've clinched a playoff. Now, seeding can still move, like I said, but 1 through 5 are locked in to that top playoff. The Pelicans are the only team that can fall out of the playoffs and into the play-ins. They're competing with the Suns right now, who are 1 game back of them, and the Kings, who are 2 games back. The Lakers are 2.5, and the Warriors are 3. So anything can happen in these last 3 or so games that these teams have to play as we wind down the season in the NBA. But the East is a little more interesting because you have Boston at the top, obviously. We just talked about how weak that East is outside of them. You have the Bucks there in second, only one game up on the Knicks. The Knicks might slide in and get that second seed, but really 2 all the way down to 8, anything can happen. There's only 3 games left. So technically the furthest that the Bucks can fall is to the 7 seed. But you could have a situation where the Miami Heat, where the Philadelphia 76ers go win out and the Bucks lose out. They have the same record. And I'm not sure who has the tiebreaker in that situation, but you could have the Bucks fall all the way down to 7. All the way down from 2 to 7 in just 3 games. The East is Celtics, everybody else. It would be a travesty if the Celtics did not win the East, because they are just head and shoulders better than everybody else in that conference. And they've already clinched that 1 seed, obviously. There's a more intriguing 1 seed battle there in the West between Minnesota, Denver, and OKC. OKC is 1 game back of Minnesota and Denver. Minnesota does have the tiebreaker over Denver right now. All 3 of those teams have 3 games left to play. There's some massive games down the stretch to watch for seeding, but playoffs are set. The Bucks most likely won't have to play until after the play-ins, but if they lose out, they might have to play a play-in game. They have not an easy schedule. They have the Magic twice and the Thunder. These are all playoff teams pretty solidly. Orlando is just 2 games back of the Bucks right now in that 4 seed. They are getting home court advantage for the first round, most likely. They're tied with Cleveland. But, you could see a world where the Bucks, everything just goes wrong for them. You have this injury, you're already on a losing streak a little bit, and now you have a tough final 3 games, and you fall all the way into that play-in. And if you go into those play-in games without Giannis, I understand you fall to 7, you would then play the 8. You'd then play the 8 seed Miami Heat. If we just keep everything else the same, move everybody else, move Milwaukee down to 7, you'd play the 8 seed Miami Heat. That's going to be a tough game without Giannis. You'd most likely get out of there. I think even without Giannis, they could beat the Bulls or the Hawks. But the Hawks could put up a fight. There is a danger where they don't even make the actual playoffs. Now, that is worst case scenario. I think Dame is good enough on his own to keep them at least in the top 6. They're not going to lose out, I don't think. I think they'll take at least 1 from the Magic. They are 1 at home. That's going to happen tonight. That's their last home game. And then you get 2 on the road. They were able to hold off the Celtics even without Giannis' injury. So they did snap that losing streak. The Celtics didn't take a single free throw all game, which is crazy. That is insane. But sometimes that's just how it goes. The Celtics are taking it easy for the playoffs. They don't want to get hurt. And the Bucks, the rest of the East is, it's a smorgasbord. Anything can happen. 2 can move to 7. 7 can move to 2. It's insane. Anyway, in our 3rd segment coming up next, we are going to move out of the NBA, talk a little bit about the NFL. Josh Allen, the defensive end for the Jacksonville Jaguars, got a bag last night, or I guess this morning. 5 years, $150 million. Huge contract for him. We will go over that, what it means for the Jaguars, their draft, their future, the rest of the league, the AFC South, what it means for the playoffs. All of that coming up next on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast,
Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about the NBA, Giannis' injury, what that might mean for the seeding in the East and the West in general, with the playoffs right around the corner, 3 or 4 games for everybody else to play. We are almost done with the NBA season, getting into the meat and potatoes of it, the playoffs coming right around the corner. In our first segment, we went over the exciting debut of Jackson Holliday. He debuts tonight at 7:10. Very excited to see what he can do in his first crack at the major league level. Now we take a look here in our third segment. We're going to talk a little bit about a massive contract that was given out in the NFL. Josh Allen and the Jaguars agreed to terms on a 5-year, $150 million deal after he signed the franchise tag, leaving just 2 players left on the franchise tag that haven't signed extensions. At least one of those is looking for a trade. Not sure if it's going to happen, but T. Higgins is out there looking for a trade. We will break all of this down in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. If you do, your message will pop up on the bottom of the screen. We'll have a little discussion about what you had to say. You can control what we talk about here on the show. All you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a message with a tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give. But yeah, like I was saying, the big contract news came out this morning. Josh Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars, a 5-year, $150 million deal, making him one of the top 5 highest paid defensive players by average annual value. You take a look at that stat, he just passes Brian Burns, who signed a massive deal with the Giants. It was a 6-year $150, so he beats him out by just a little bit there. There's only a couple of guys ahead of him on that list. Josh Allen is coming off a 17.5 sack season, dominating opposing offenses. He was franchise tagged earlier in the offseason. Now he's been able to agree to an extension in Jacksonville, and the big question about this contract is it's not like they added another player. What does this mean for the Jaguars as a whole? Because the Jaguars are in a really interesting position where they are kind of set if you look on paper, but they're not as I'm not sure about Trevor Lawrence, and I know he's been through a whole bunch of injuries, and his wide receivers have been interesting. Calvin Ridley didn't work out like they wanted him to last season. Christian Kirk has been great. Evan Ingram has been great. That offensive line has been a mess, but they've been getting better. The defense has slowly started to return to what it was with Blake Bortles back in 2018, something like that. Trevor Lawrence is he's a good quarterback. It's hard to say if he's that franchise guy yet. And they have to make that decision probably this season. You lock up Josh Allen. This is the 3rd year in a row that the Jaguars have locked up that that guy that they franchise tagged. They got Cam Robinson last season, and I believe they had I don't remember who they had the season before, but that's 3 seasons in a row where they've locked up the guy they franchise tag, and that's a really important thing because the franchise tag, it's not only, hey, you're stuck here, it lets you extend the negotiation window. And being able to do that and consistently get it done with these guys that you're franchise tagging shows a really big turnaround in the organization. If you remember back just a couple years ago, when Tom Coughlin made his return to Jacksonville, there were so many complaints. It was one of the worst run teams in all of football, and now they've been able to turn it around in just like 3 short years. It's been very impressive to see how they've been able to turn it around, be a playoff contender every single season with Trevor Lawrence. Now, they obviously want to be more than that. They go and they get the prodigal son, Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick, touted as that number 1 overall pick since he was in middle school, basically. I remember reading a Sports Illustrated article about him when he was in when he was in middle school, saying this guy's going to be the next thing. Uh, Crazy how they know that. But Trevor Lawrence is on the Jags. You have Christian Kirk, who's been really solid for you. But then all of a sudden, C.J. Stroud and the Texans emerge. And they go out and they add Stephon Diggs. And they go out and they add Joe Mixon. And they add all this on defense. They have great young corners, great young linebackers. And you say, did the Jaguars even get a chance to run this division? They didn't. Last year was their shot. They were 8-3, and then they blew it. They couldn't win a game to save their lives down the stretch, and they end up missing the playoffs. Houston goes all in, becomes aggressive, trades away their first-round pick, makes a move for Stephon Diggs from the Bills, does some crazy stuff where they reduce his contract down to 1 year that I still can't wrap my head around. But they are making these moves now. It's their division now. Last year it was the Jags, and they squandered it. And it reminds you how fast things can change in sports, in the NFL, in general. Because the AFC is stacked, and if you're not winning your division, it's going to be really, really tough to get those 3 wildcard spots. You look at the entire AFC North. Someone's going to win that division. The Bengals are getting Joe Burrow back. The Browns are maybe getting healthy. I'm not sure exactly how much faith I'm putting in Deshaun Watson. In a perfect world, he'd be off the team, but they're paying him enough money where he's going to be the starter. And now you have Jameis Winston to back him up, who I love Jameis Winston. Not sure how much that's going to help, but you still have an elite defense back there. The Ravens, 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson now leads an offense that is getting his top weapon back in Mark Andrews, is continuing to develop around guys like Zay Flowers, and if he can ever stay healthy, if the rest of the wide receiver core can never stay healthy, they'll have a solid one. The who am I missing? The Steelers. They go out and they get a quarterback. That was what they were missing last season. They trade away Kenny Pickett, replace him with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Not sure how that's going to work up there, but their defense is what's been carrying them, and their defense is still very, very good up there in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin doesn't lose. Very impressive. One of the more impressive things that I've seen, not having a losing season one time in 17 years. Because they've had some stinker teams, and they've been able to pull out at least a 500 record, which is shocking. And I don't think he gets enough prop for that. I think he kind of gets bashed a little bit for it, saying, hey, you're actually just okay. But a lot of people would kill to be as consistent as the Steelers. So, very impressed by Mike Tomlin and what he does there. Along those same lines, you look at the AFC East. I know we were having a discussion in our production meeting today. Who's the best team there? You have the Dolphins with Tua and Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and Achane and Mostert and that stacked, speedy offense. The defense has some question marks. They let a couple key pieces go, and the same thing on the offensive line, but they can maybe work around that. You still have a lot of great talent down there in Miami. They're still a very good team. They're going to be competing for a playoff spot with the Jags here. Same thing with 3 of those teams in the AFC North. You have the Bills. I don't think they're going to win their division, but you still have Josh Allen. Josh Allen is the second best quarterback in the league. He's going to keep them competitive. And Aaron Rodgers and the Jets up there, at least 2 of those teams are going to be vying for those spots. That's 6 teams already. Half of those teams are going to miss the playoffs. And we don't really need to talk about the AFC West because the Broncos are a mess, the Raiders are a mess, the Chargers are a mess, and the Chiefs are Patrick Mahomes. So, when you look at the AFC, you have your division winners, right? And then you have 6 teams competing for 3 spots. And that is not an easy crowd to get through. And Jacksonville, I think it's important that they extend a guy like Josh Allen. He's a leader. Just almost put up 20 sacks. Almost put up a 20-sack season. That's insane. He's very, very good at football. He deserves all the money he gets. But the Jacksonville Jaguars need to make a big splash move, or at least they need to go get that guy that's going to change their offense. Make it so Trevor Lawrence has time. I don't know if that's going to be a run. I don't know if that's going to be offensive line. I don't know if that's going to be an elite wide receiver. But they need to make that change because right now they're in an arms race with Houston and they're losing. Crazy that Houston is already up here after one season, but that's a whole nother segment, a whole nother topic to talk about. In our and it's just the NFL offseason is always going. So there's always stuff going on. Jacksonville, again, I love the move. He deserves the money. $150 million over 5 years. He is hopefully going to keep up that sack production, coming off his best season of his career, 17.5 sacks, by far his best. But coming up in our next segment, close out the show, we are going to finish going around all four major North American sports. We're going to go to the NHL. There's a story circulating with the Arizona Coyotes, the Coyotes that have been in turmoil with their stadium for as long as I can remember. They're playing at Arizona State Stadium right now. They're not a great team. They don't get the fan support until they talk about moving. They're talking about moving again. I'll let you know where, talk about if that's even a good idea, and what it might look like if they do end up making this move. Stick around. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody, to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. If you are just tuning in, we just finished talking about Josh Allen, his massive contract, and where that puts the Jaguars in the standings of the AFC. A really tough conference this season, especially when compared to the NFC. You have 10 teams, 10 out of 16, that I could see as playoff teams. And that is a huge number. So good for the Jaguars, good for Josh Allen. 5 years, $150 million. But it's going to be a tough sledding this season. You might even be able to throw the Colts in there. So maybe we have 11 out of 16. But you have, in our second segment, we talked about the NBA playoffs, what that picture is looking like. It's starting to come into shape. Everyone that's in is in. We still have the play-ins to decide seeding and all that stuff, but everyone that is not going to be advancing past the regular season is officially eliminated. So we know our playoff field, our play-in field, is still being locked in. And in our first segment, we talked about Jackson Holliday and his debut in the MLB coming up tonight against the Red Sox at 7:10 p.m. Eastern Time. In this fourth and final segment, we are going to cover all our bases, hit the fourth of the big four sports in North America, head over to the NHL. We have an interesting story, something that kind of pops up every other year with the Arizona Coyotes. They are being talked about being moved, but this seems more imminent than usual. We'll talk about that in just a second, but if you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen. We'll have a little discussion about what you wanted to talk about. That's right. You can control, excuse me. I apologize. You can control what we talk about here on the show. All you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave that tip or donation. We appreciate anything that you do give. Once again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Appreciate you for watching. Let's go ahead and finish off this show with our fourth and final segment. The Arizona Coyotes are a franchise that for years has been in turmoil, financial turmoil. They almost went bankrupt. The NHL had to save them a couple years ago. The stadium, they had to leave the stadium because the lease agreement ran out and they didn't have the money to set up a new one, and now they are playing at Arizona State's hockey stadium. The NHL now came out today. They are preparing a contingency that could possibly move the Arizona Coyotes to Utah as soon as next season. That is something that's been thought about for quite some time. The Arizona fans show up whenever they're being talked about moving, but they don't really show up any other time. And that's a combination of things. You know, the team hasn't been very good. The ownership hasn't been very good. There hasn't been a lot of reasons to show up to these Coyote games. But once they talk about relocating, they all show up in droves. So they have a solid fan base down there. The NHL is convinced they want that warm weather market. They want that desert market to have a team, and they're convinced it'll work. And I'm sure it can, but under this current ownership group, what's going on right now, the ineptitude that they have, the fact that they've almost had to be bankrupt in the last couple seasons as a professional team, is not the greatest look. They are looking at relocating them to Utah, Salt Lake City. So Utah, I'm not sure if it would be the Utah Coyotes, but they have, an arena out there in Utah that they can play in, bigger than the college arena that they're currently playing in. And we're looking at the NHL buying it. The NHL, like I said, the ownership group for the Coyotes is not good. The NHL has already expanded twice. The NHL has already expanded twice in 2 seasons. They had pretty recently. You had you had the Vegas Golden Knights come in. They show that it can work in a desert market. They showed it can work in a big metropolis out there in the desert, and that's really exciting. Big fan of that. They've been really successful. They won a cup last season, the defending Stanley Cup champions, and the Seattle Kraken, a market that has been really good for hockey so far. I know it's only their second season. It's been really good up there in Seattle. Really, I guess this is their third or fourth season at this point. But the NHL and Gary Bettman is not looking at expanding anymore. And Salt Lake City is a market that hasn't been tapped yet. No, they have the Utah Jazz, but that's about it. This is a city that has shown it can support a franchise. We see how successful the Jazz are. They've been there for quite some time. Hasn't really been an issue at all with them having this. But there are talks about this, and the Coyotes don't seem super good at running a franchise, really. And that's kind of the most important thing. When you are running a franchise, you need to be successful. You can't be going bankrupt. The NHL is really determined to make it work in Arizona, but the leash is getting shorter and shorter with every continuous failure. And I'm sure they'll try again at some point. I'm sure. And I think one of the reasons that they're willing to move right now is because they already have that foothold in a warm weather desert area, not just down there in Florida, but in the West Coast, the warm weather on the West Coast. You have LA, you have Vegas now, Vegas being one of the better teams in hockey. They have a nice foothold there. Maybe they'll try Arizona again in the future. But it's getting to the point where it just doesn't seem like they're going to get there. Arizona this season, 71 points, eliminated from playoff contention. They haven't made the playoffs since 2020 when the playoff field was expanded. So that one doesn't really count either. But we take a look at Utah's ownership group. They're willing to spend the money, move it to Utah, renovate a stadium. actually have them play in a normal sized stadium, not a college stadium that only fits 20,000. When you're trying to sell out arenas, you want to have a place that can fill the seats, get everyone in. And it's a big college arena, don't get me wrong. It's very big for college. There's a reason that it's even being able to play, but the locker rooms are not up to code. They've been working on fixing those, and it's just been a mess down there in Arizona for as long as I can remember. But we talked about the NBA playoffs winding down. The NHL is mirror image of the NBA. They do their playoffs a little bit differently, where they have divisions and then wild cards, but the wild card race in the East has been super interesting. You have 4 teams, I guess 5 teams, technically. The Devils are still in there, and so is Buffalo, but they're a little more out at this point. The Capitals, with Ovechkin scoring 30 goals for the 18th time. 18 seasons of 30 goals. He is the greatest goal scorer of all time. I think he needs 43 more goals to pass Wayne Gretzky for the most goals of all time. He is going to do that maybe next season. The heater he has been on recently. He started off slow. He goes as the Caps go. The Caps do good, he does good. I guess he does good, the Caps do good is the way it should go. He has the Caps up 1 point on the red hot Pittsburgh Penguins, who finally lost a game. But you take a look at this playoff race, it's really, really heating up down there at the bottom. You have the Caps in that second wild card. They have 85 points. For those who don't know how it works, 2 points for a win, 1 point for an overtime loss, no points for a loss. So it goes by points. That's how they do their standings. Pittsburgh has 84 points. Detroit has 84 points. And Philly has 83 points. So there are 4 teams separated by 1 game of points. And the Caps and the Flyers play on the final game of the season. So there's 4 games left for all these teams to play. 3 games for Philly, 4 games for the other 3. You get to the point where that could legitimately be a playoff game. Washington just beat Detroit the other night. Detroit plays the Penguins on tomorrow at 7 p.m. That is a huge, huge game for them, for both of those teams. The loser of that game is all but knocked out of playoff contention. They'd have 3 games left to make up basically 2 games of points. So it'd be super tough for these teams to make it. The Flyers, like I said, they have the Capitals to close out the season. And the Penguins, Red Wings, none of these teams have easy schedules. This is coming down the stretch. It's going to be a bloodbath down there, and I'm very, very curious to see exactly how it turns out. I'm curious to see what you guys think. I think that the Capitals are going to be able to hold on. Just the way that Charlie Lindgren is playing right now for the Caps, he made 42 saves last night. He made 42 saves, shut out the Detroit Red Wings, who are in a battle for that playoff spot. He pushed them over the top. Ovechkin had a goal. They win 2-0 to get that spot back. It is in a lot of sports, it comes down to playing hot at the right time. And the Penguins just went on a stretch where they won like 5 straight games. They just lost a game to the Maple Leafs on Monday, but before that, they had won like 4 straight games against really good opponents. The Caps, the Devils, the Lightning, and the Rangers. 3 of those are currently in the playoffs. They vaulted themselves back into contention right there at the end. They were all but eliminated, and now they're 1 point out. It's going to be a race to the finish. I'm very excited to see how exactly this turns out. Excuse me. But NBA and NHL playoffs are right around the corner. The best time of year, the best playoffs. I'm so excited for all of it. I'd love to hear all your guys' thoughts in the comment on anything we talked about in today's show. Appreciate all of you for listening. I will be back on Tuesday, so no show Thursday, Friday, or Monday. But I will be back on Tuesday to break down everything that's going on the weekend. We'll talk some UFL. We'll talk some NBA and NHL playoffs. I believe all of those will be set by then. We'll go through at least one of those on Tuesday. The other one will be on Wednesday. Very excited for the rest of the week coming up next. I hope you all have a great weekend, a great rest of your week. I will talk to you on Tuesday. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn.